Ruthie from FS Securities, a stockbroking firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And every Monday, as usual, I go through what happened globally around the world and try to forecast what we may see this coming weeks. I show you how investors and traders can make money on the stock market. I show you what is hot and what is not, and what you should hold and what you should fold. So enjoy the presentation, and if you have any feedback, we would really appreciate hearing from you. First of all, and let's see what happened on Saturday morning. We start with the Dow Jones Industrial Average. On Saturday morning it was down 4%. However, you will see later on in my presentation that over the week it was positive. The S&P 500 on Friday was down 3.4%, the Nasdaq down 3.8%, and in Europe, the Stoxx 50 index, which comprises most major European markets, was down 4.2%. And in London, the FTSE 100 index was down 5.3%, and in Germany, the DAX was down 3.6%. In Japan, the Nikkei index was nearly up 4%, and in China, the Shanghai index was steady with 0.3% rise. On our market on Friday, the ASX 200, that is our gauge, was down 270 points, down 5.3%, wiping out the profit that it made earlier in the week. And you will see later on that overall the week was positive. And the futures this morning showing that the market most likely will open shortly flat, 6 points higher, maybe even lower. Gold on Friday was up $7.90, $1,652 US per ounce, and you will see later on in my presentation on week, gold was up nearly 160 points over the week. Silver on Friday was down 5 cents to $14.63, and crude oil was down 76 cents to $21.84. And the Australian dollar, about 61.6 US cents, 55.3 euro cents, and 49.5 British pence. Now, looking at the big picture over the full 2 weeks, so we compare what happened last week with overall picture over the 2 weeks combined. So over the full week and from around the globe, we start with the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which makes up the top 30 US stocks, which had a rise of 13%, as you can see here, a rise of 2,463 points. However, over the full 2 weeks combined, it was down 7%, or 1,548. Well, what does it mean for our market, you may ask? The ASX futures are showing that the market will open flat, as I mentioned earlier. And by the way, the Australian dollar, you can see here, over last week was up 6.3%. However, over the last 2 weeks was down 0.2%. Gold, as you can see here on Saturday, was trading at 1,630. That is actually a rise of 130 US dollars per ounce, up 8.6%. Over the last 2 weeks combined, it was up 6.7%, or 101 US dollars. So 2 weeks of continuous increase in the price of gold. While silver over the last 2 weeks was up 15.8%, or $2 US per ounce, and was trading at $14.63 US per ounce. West Texas crude oil 7.6%, or $1.80 down US per barrel. It was down 33.7% over the last 2 weeks, or 11 US dollars per ounce. Iron ore imported for BHP, Rio and Fortescue was down 0.5% to $86.36 US per ton. Now, if you look at our market over the closing bell on Friday and over the full week, our market was up 0.5%, as you can see here. And our ASX 200, that is our gauge, is made up to a greater extent by two major sectors, the financial and the material. The material and mining sectors were actually over 4.5%, that is actually, as you can see here, and the material over the last 2 weeks was actually up only 0.2%. The financial sectors, you can see here it was down 3.4% last week, but down 16.6% over the last 2 weeks. So the banks have really had a bad 2 weeks combined. But because of China, what's happening in China and the small recovery in China, we can see that the price of iron ore price may stabilize, and therefore the material sectors are up. Now looking across the top stocks, the best performing stock over the full week of some of the major companies, Woolworths was up 7.7%, even though it was up only 1.1% over 2 weeks. And then we can see down over this column here that Macquarie Bank was up 6.3%, recovering a bit of the losses it incurred over the last 2 weeks, where we've seen Macquarie Bank down 27%. ANZ Bank was up 3.5%, but I think of all the banks, you can see that Westpac had the best rise last week, nearly 6%. However, over 2 weeks it was down still 13%. But look at Worley Parsons, down 40% over 2 weeks. Woodside Petroleum down 24% over the last 2 weeks. QBE down 24% over 2 weeks. And so on and so on. Anyway, if you want a copy of this slide, call us and we'll send it to you. In terms of volume, because of course if you look at volume being an important leading indicator, you can see that we've had a major drop in the market volume. However, there was a bit of increase last week, nearly 3.5 billion transaction over on Friday. And if you look at the advances over declines, by the way, Friday the volume was up. However, 34% of all the stocks were actually in declines, and only 26.6% were advancing. However, the last previous three days, the advances were higher than the declines, but you can see here the volume was lower. So that tells you that the volume is actually a leading indicator. When the price goes up and the volume is up, that's very positive. When the price goes up and the volume goes down, that is actually bearish. And then you can see that the prices were down and the volume increased. That is actually continuing the bearish trend. Advances over declines over the full week, you can see that for the first time after 4 weeks, for the first time in 5 weeks, we've seen the advances exceeding declines. Let's hope that this week we'll see probably a continuation of this trend. Our mechanical system that we have designed over the last 20 years, we look at the indicators, 5 out of 8 indicators on one time frame, which needs to be confirmed by 5 out of 8 indicators in a lower time frame. So for instance, the investor, we look at the monthly and the weekly, and then for the traders we look for the daily and the weekly and the daily. Well, you can see that the market in America is starting to improve a bit, especially for the investor and the conservative trader, going from bearish to neutral. It doesn't mean that it's time to get into the market, but it tells you that maybe we've seen the worst already. Let's see what happens this week. Gold, on the other hand, went from bearish to bullish for the very aggressive trader. Crude oil continues to be very bearish across all type of traders. And then if you look at the currency, the Australian dollar has improved from bearish to neutral. Now looking at the daily, by the way, I said that's the weekly and that's the daily. You need confirmation by the weekly and the daily to be able to actually go into the market and have some more confidence. Looking at the chart, this is the weekly chart, and for the first time in nearly 5 weeks, the weekly chart for the Dow shows a green candle. And you can see here, even though Friday was red candle, but we've seen some very positive increased trend on the top side. Obviously it's based on the stimulus that the government is putting in America. Whether the stimulus is going to really have a great effect versus a light effect, time will tell. On our market, look at the All Ordinary, bearish, but it improved for the investor and the conservative trader from bearish to neutral. Again, we're saying that neutral does not mean it's time to enter the market on the positive side. However, you might see that if you're actually bearish and taking some bearish position, maybe it's time to close those bearish position if you went into short positions. Gold, on the other hand, for the very aggressive trader on the weekly and the daily, you can see here that we can see that you may enter the gold market, depends on which company you're going to trade, of course, for the very aggressive trader. The very aggressive trader is prepared to take more risk than the investor. Now look at the chart. Again, like the American market, we've seen the first green candle, weekly green candle in 5 weeks. And again, based on what happened in America, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we've seen a decline in the market. But still, this is an uptrend market. Okay, the best performing, the most active company on Friday, Horizon Holdings, if you want to have a look at this, AMP and the ASX, Medibank Private, Bramble, Amcor, A2 Milk. Although A2 Milk was negative, had a negative percentage, again, it's really much better than all the other companies that actually shown a lot more negative performance. In terms of volume of the week, we have a scanning system. We look at the top 50 and see which company had excessive volume over and above the average volume over 50 weeks. Well, we couldn't see anything for the mid cap, for the top 50. However, for the mid cap, we see the Rural Funds Group had an increase of 0.3% with 90% above the average volume. So in other words, the volume was almost 100% higher, from 3.4 million transactions per week. We've seen last week 6.5 million transactions. Had a slight increase in the price. I wouldn't worry too much about it. However, if you are aggressive and going bearish, you can see here this company, AP Eagers, had a decrease in the price by 23%, and the volume was nearly 6 times the volume. AUB Group, Aventus, Accent, Centuria, Charter Hall, all of these companies can actually, for the very aggressive trader only, you can actually make some money for 1 or 2 day trade. Okay, in terms of what we see in terms of trading, X market and so on, again, we can have some companies giving you some dividend this week. Finally, our disclaimer. Remember, everything I said today is only for general advice only. Nothing is private, not private advances or anything like that, or declines. So before you take any action, please consult with us or with your professional advisor. And if you have any questions, all you have to do is talk to us. This is our email address. I can talk to you anytime, 7 days a week. or you can ring me on my mobile, again 7 days a week, 12-13 hours a day. If you're ringing from overseas, it's 61 for the country code. You don't need the 0 if you're ringing my mobile. 61 411 259526. And locally, you ring my mobile 0411 259526, and I'm available, as I mentioned, 13 hours a day, 7 days a week. So happy trading, and we'll talk to you again on a regular basis, and hopefully we can help you out with your trading.